If you don't mind, I'd like to talk for a few minutes about two authors I read for the first time this year who are now two of my favorite authors. So the first one is George Mackay Brown. I read three of his novels. Greenvo, read this just a couple weeks ago. And then these two I read over the summer, Vinland and Magnus. And I've also started reading some of his poetry. This is all of his poetry, I just haven't finished it yet. So George Mackay Brown is from, or was from, he's passed away, the Orkney Islands, which are a small archipelago off the northern coast of Scotland. Along with the Shetland Islands, they were part of the Kingdom of Norway for most of the Middle Ages, but they became part of the Kingdom of Scotland in 1470 something, I think. So the culture and the history is kind of this interesting mix of Scottish and Norse. And all of his writing is about the Orkney Islands. He's got historical novels, sort of dealing with the end of the Viking Age in the Orkney Islands. This is a contemporary setting. It's in Orkney in the late 1960s, and pretty much all of his poetry is about people in Orkney or landscapes in Orkney or the sea around Orkney. But I think George Mackay Brown is a great example of how a good writer can find something universal within the very specific, very particular, because all of his work is very specific to Orkney, but he manages to tap into something that I think anyone can relate to in his characters, in his appreciation for nature. So I really like that about him. The other author I read for the first time this year, who is now one of my favorites, is 2025's Nobel Prize winner, Laszlo Krasznahorkai. So I read two of his novels, The Melancholy of Resistance and Satan Tango. And then I also, just a couple minutes ago, finished reading this novella. This is Spadework for a Palace. So Krasznahorkai, the thing you'll probably hear about him is that he writes these giant sentences. Sentences sometimes will go on for the entire length of a book. This is a 96-page novella. It contains only one period. Actually, I think there's some quotations in here, either from other authors or from characters who are not the narrator, and those quotations have periods in them. But as far as what the narrator is saying, it's one sentence the whole way for all 96 pages. And then these ones, there are sentences that end, but they go on for like half a page sometimes, and there's no paragraph breaks. There are chapter breaks in most of his longer novels, like these two, but there's no paragraph breaks ever. So that is the thing you probably hear about him. I didn't find that as difficult as I thought, honestly. Once you get used to it, after a couple pages, you get into the flow of his sentences, and they do flow pretty well. The other thing you'll hear, and it's actually the blurb on this book, Susan Sontag refers to him as the contemporary Hungarian master of the apocalypse. People love to talk about how all of his work is apocalyptic, and that's definitely present in The Melancholy of Resistance. I felt like this book, though, Satan Tango, was not really apocalyptic. It's kind of just, things are stagnant. There's definitely a sense of decay and deterioration, but I didn't feel like it was apocalyptic. But I started to understand it a little more, when I read Spadework for a Palace. So Spadework for a Palace is this long, rambling sentence from a narrator named Herman Melville, no relation, but he is obsessed with the famous author Herman Melville. He's also obsessed with the author Malcolm Lowry, who was also obsessed with Herman Melville, and he's obsessed with the architect Lebbeus Woods, and this cover is actually a drawing by Lebbeus Woods. Just checking what I knocked down earlier. Okay, it's not one of the books for this video, so we're going to leave it there. Anyways, in the course of this book, though, we have this character who's wandering through Manhattan, tracing the steps of those other artists that he's obsessed with, and imagining that he's walking in their footsteps, because all of them lived in Manhattan at one point. But then there's this part in the middle. Oh, and the other thing he's doing, he's imagining and kind of planning this library he wants to build that would be closed, because he worked in the New York Public Library, but he always hated the people coming in to borrow books, and he doesn't want anybody to borrow books. He wants the books to be locked away forever. So that's where the title comes from. He wants to build a palace for knowledge, but knowledge that nobody would be allowed to access. So that's what this book is about. But then there's this passage in it that kind of deepened my understanding of what people mean when they say that Krasznahorkai is writing about the apocalypse. And it's, if you have the book, it's on the end of page 69 into the start of page 70. And he's talking about how the narrator is saying this. Krasznahorkai is not necessarily the one saying this, but I suspect it might be what Krasznahorkai thinks. He's saying that all of reality is catastrophe. All of reality is deterioration and destruction. And there's no good or evil necessarily. It's just everything is constantly being destroyed. And that's the only thing that's real. And I think maybe that's what people mean when they say that Krasznahorkai is writing about the apocalypse. And that is in here. It's not like a single apocalyptic event, but the idea that everything is constantly deteriorating is definitely in Satan Tango. And it's explicitly stated in Spadework for a Palace. So that's what I like about him. Also, I feel like, and this actually, I'm going to grab another one of his books that I haven't read yet. No, it's over here. So this is going to be the next one I read, but there's this quote on the back. Yeah, this is from Adam Thirlwell. I don't know who that is, I'm sorry, but I love this quote, and it encapsulates another thing that I love about Krasznahorkai. He says, Krasznahorkai's subject is total disenchantment with the world, and yet the manner in which he presents this disenchantment is hypnotically enchanting. He is one of the great inventors of new forms in contemporary literature. So this idea that he's writing about these bleak, terrible things, terrible circumstances, people in terrible situations, but he's writing about them in such a beautiful and captivating way. So that's the other thing I like about Laszlo Krasznahorkai, and if that sounds good, I do recommend checking him out.